The massive Zephyrian war fleet hung in space like angry metal giants. Their dark hulls blocked out the stars as they waited in perfect formation around the gas giant Kepler 442b. Admiral Thokmar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the destroyer of worlds, watching the long-range sensors with growing interest. "Contact confirmed, Admiral," his tactical officer reported. "Unknown vessels approaching from the outer system. They're not responding to our identification signals." Thokmar's four eyes narrowed as he studied the display. 3 small ships moved toward them at a steady pace, showing no signs of fear or aggression. This was unusual. Most species either fled immediately when they encountered the Zephyrian Empire or attacked in desperate fury. These newcomers did neither. "What do our databases tell us about these ships?" Thokmar asked. "Nothing, sir. The design is completely unknown. Hull composition appears to be some form of advanced alloy. Energy signatures are minimal, suggesting civilian vessels." The Admiral's mandibles clicked together in thought. The Empire had been expanding for 3 centuries, consuming every civilization they encountered. Most species begged for mercy or tried to bargain with worthless trinkets. These ships approached as if they owned the star system. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, revealing a creature unlike anything in the Empire's vast databases. The being appeared bipedal, with smooth skin and strange hair covering the top of its head. It wore simple clothing and sat calmly in what looked like a basic command chair. "Greetings," the creature said in perfect Zephyrian language. "I am Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez, representing the human species from the planet Earth. We come in peace and request permission to approach for diplomatic discussions." Thokmar studied the alien carefully. She showed no signs of fear despite facing the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Her voice remained steady and professional, as if this were a routine business meeting. "I am Admiral Thokmar of the Zephyrian Empire," he replied. "You have entered Imperial space without authorization. Standard protocol requires immediate surrender of your vessels and submission to Imperial authority." Ambassador Rodriguez nodded politely. "We understand your position, Admiral. However, humanity prefers to establish formal diplomatic relations before discussing territorial arrangements. We have much to offer in terms of trade and cultural exchange." The bridge crew exchanged glances. This creature spoke as if it had options, as if the mighty Zephyrian Empire was just another government to negotiate with rather than the supreme authority in this region of space. "Perhaps you don't understand the situation," Thokmar said, his voice taking on a threatening tone. "The Empire does not negotiate with lesser species. You will surrender immediately or face the consequences." "We understand perfectly," Rodriguez replied calmly. "We simply believe there are better alternatives to immediate conflict. May we approach to discuss this in person?" Thokmar found himself oddly impressed by the alien's composure. In his 3 decades of service, he had never encountered a species that remained so calm when facing Imperial might. Either these humans were incredibly stupid or incredibly confident. "Very well," he decided. "You may dock with our flagship, but understand that any hostile action will result in the immediate destruction of your vessels and your homeworld." "Understood, Admiral. We appreciate your willingness to talk." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in unusual silence. Thokmar had expected pleading, threats, or attempts at bribery. Instead, he got polite professionalism from a creature that acted like she dealt with galactic empires every day. 2 hours later, Admiral Thokmar stood in the flagship's main docking bay, surrounded by a full honor guard of Zephyrian warriors. Each soldier stood nearly 3 meters tall, their natural armor gleaming under the harsh lights. They carried weapons capable of reducing buildings to ash. The human shuttle docked with barely a whisper. Its design was elegant but unremarkable, showing none of the aggressive angles favored by most species' military vessels. The airlock cycled and 4 humans stepped out. Ambassador Rodriguez walked in front, her movements confident and measured. She was smaller than most species the Empire encountered, barely reaching the chest of a Zephyrian warrior. Behind her came 3 others, a man with dark hair who seemed to observe everything with quiet interest. a woman who carried herself with the bearing of someone used to command, and another man whose relaxed posture somehow suggested coiled strength. Admiral Thokmar, Rodriguez said, offering what appeared to be a traditional human greeting gesture. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Allow me to introduce my colleagues. This is Jake Morrison, our cultural attaché, Karen Walsh, our trade negotiator, and Ryan Clark, our security advisor. Thokmar studied each human carefully. They showed no fear despite being surrounded by armed warriors in the heart of an enemy vessel. Morrison smiled politely and nodded to the Zephyrian soldiers as if greeting old friends. Walsh appeared to be mentally cataloging everything she saw, while Clark maintained a relaxed stance that somehow put the Admiral on edge. Your species is either very brave or very foolish, Thokmar observed. We prefer to think of ourselves as optimistic, Rodriguez replied. We believe most conflicts can be resolved through honest communication and mutual benefit. The Admiral led them through the ship's corridors toward the conference room. Along the way, other humans asked questions about Zephyrian architecture, commented on the engineering of the ship, and generally behaved like tourists rather than prisoners. Tell me about your homeworld, Thokmar said as they walked. Earth is a beautiful planet, Rodriguez answered. We have over 8 billion people living in relative harmony. We've learned that cooperation usually produces better results than conflict. 8 billion. Thokmar almost stumbled. The entire Zephyrian Empire contained maybe 200 million citizens across dozens of worlds. These humans claim to have 40 times that number on a single planet. That seems like a large population for one world, he said carefully. We've learned to manage our resources efficiently, Walsh interjected. Necessity has made us quite good at organizing large-scale operations. They reached the conference room where Emperor Vextar himself waited. The ruler of the Zephyrian Empire sat on his throne, a massive figure whose presence had intimidated thousands of ambassadors from conquered worlds. Ambassador Rodriguez walked forward without hesitation and offered the same polite greeting she had given the Admiral. Your Imperial Majesty, she said. Humanity is honored by this opportunity to meet with you directly. Emperor Vextar leaned forward, studying these strange new creatures who showed no fear in his presence. Something about their calm confidence suggested that this negotiation would be unlike any other in the Empire's long history of conquest. Emperor Vextar gestured for the humans to sit at the massive conference table. The chairs had been quickly adjusted to accommodate their smaller size, though they still looked like children sitting at an adult's table. Despite this, none of the humans appeared uncomfortable or diminished by their surroundings. So, the Emperor began, his voice echoing through the chamber. Tell me about this Earth of yours. What makes you think you can negotiate with the Zephyrian Empire as equals? Ambassador. Rodriguez folded her hands calmly on the table. Your Majesty, we don't presume equality in terms of current territorial holdings or military presence in this region. However, we believe our species might have valuable things to offer each other through peaceful cooperation, such as Admiral Thokmar interjected from his position beside the throne. Jake Morrison leaned forward slightly. Well, Admiral, human culture has always been built around solving complex problems through innovation. We've had to learn this because our homeworld presented us with significant challenges. What kind of challenges? Emperor Vextar asked, genuinely curious despite himself. Morrison's expression grew thoughtful. Limited resources, harsh environments, and the need to organize large populations effectively. For example, we once had a conflict that lasted 6 years and involved most of our planet's major powers. By the end, we had mobilized over 100 million people for military service alone. The Zephyrian leaders exchanged glances. 100 million soldiers from a single conflict? The entire Imperial military contained roughly 50 million troops across their vast empire. That seems excessive for an internal dispute, Thokmar observed. It was what we needed at the time, Morrison replied casually. Humans tend to be very thorough when we commit to something. We learned early that half measures usually make problems worse. Karen Walsh spoke up. From an economic perspective, that conflict taught us valuable lessons about resource allocation and industrial production. We discovered we could convert civilian manufacturing to military purposes quite rapidly when necessary. Some of our factories could switch from producing consumer goods to military equipment in less than a month. She said this as if it were a normal business capability rather than a demonstration of a war economy that could mobilize entire civilizations. Your people sound quite adaptable, Emperor Vextar said slowly. We've had to be, Rodriguez agreed. Earth has forced us to become good at managing difficult situations. We've learned that preparation and flexibility usually lead to better outcomes than rigid thinking. Ryan Clark had remained silent during most of the conversation, but now the Emperor addressed him directly. You are described as a security advisor. What exactly does that mean in human society? Clark smiled politely. I help assess potential risks and develop appropriate responses, Your Majesty. It's mostly about planning and preparation. Have you had occasion to implement these plans? A few times, Clark replied modestly. Humans have faced various security challenges over our history. We've learned that the best way to handle dangerous situations is to train extensively and hope you never need to use that training. Admiral Thokmar found himself intrigued. What kind of training? Clark stood up smoothly. Would you like a demonstration? Perhaps some of your warriors would be interested in seeing human defensive techniques? The Admiral's mandibles clicked. With amusement, this small creature wanted to demonstrate combat techniques to Zephyrian warriors? It seemed almost insulting. Very well, Thokmar agreed. Captain Zekmor, would you care to observe human combat methods? Captain Zekmor, the largest warrior present, stepped forward. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, his natural armor plates gleaming. His arms were as thick as tree trunks, and he carried weapons that could punch through starship hulls. Clark walked to the center of the room, still wearing his diplomatic clothing. He appeared completely relaxed, even friendly. This is what we call close-quarters combat, he explained conversationally. It's based on using an opponent's size and strength against them. What happened next occurred so quickly that several Zephyrians missed it entirely. Clark moved with fluid precision, demonstrating a series of techniques that would have incapacitated Captain Zekmor in seconds if executed at full speed and force. He showed joint locks, pressure points, and leverage techniques that could disable opponents many times his size. Of course, Clark said as he finished the demonstration, this is just basic training that most humans learn for recreational purposes. We have martial arts schools in every city where people practice these techniques for exercise and enjoyment. The Zephyrian warriors stared in stunned silence. What they had just witnessed was more sophisticated than their own military combat training, and this human claimed it was merely recreational activity. Fascinating, Emperor Vextar said, though his voice carried a note of unease. Your people seem to have an unusual relationship with violence. Not violence, Your Majesty, Rodriguez clarified. We have an unusual relationship with preparation. Human history has taught us that peace is best maintained by those capable of defending it. Morrison nodded agreement. We have a saying on Earth. If you want peace, prepare for war. It doesn't mean we seek conflict, but rather that we believe readiness prevents conflict. This philosophy has served us well, Walsh added. Our economic systems, our social structures, even our entertainment often reflect this approach. We prepare for the worst while working toward the best possible outcomes. Emperor Vextar studied the 4 humans carefully. They sat calmly in the heart of his military flagship, surrounded by his most elite warriors, yet they showed no fear. Instead, they spoke of their civilization with quiet confidence that suggested vast capabilities, held in reserve. Tell me more about your entertainment, he said, curious despite growing concern. Jake Morrison brightened. Humans love stories about overcoming impossible odds. Our most popular films and books often feature small groups defeating much larger enemies through superior planning, training, and determination. We also enjoy strategy games, Walsh contributed. Many humans spend their leisure time practicing complex scenarios involving resource management, tactical planning, and long-term strategic thinking. These games often simulate large-scale conflicts, Clark added casually. Players learn to coordinate multiple armies, manage supply lines, and outmaneuver opponents with superior numbers. It's considered great fun. Admiral Thokmar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. These creatures spoke of warfare and strategy as entertainment. They practiced combat techniques for recreation. They claimed their entire civilization was organized around preparation for conflict. Your Majesty, Rodriguez said, drawing attention back to herself. We hope this conversation helps you understand that humanity values peaceful relations. We've learned through experience that cooperation produces better results than conquest. We'd much rather be your trading partners than your enemies. The way she said the last word carried no threat, no anger. It was simply a statement of fact, delivered with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout their meeting. Emperor Vextar realized he was dealing with something unprecedented in his long reign. These humans appeared to be offering genuine friendship, while simultaneously demonstrating that they were far more dangerous than their peaceful demeanor suggested. The conference continued, but now every casual comment from the humans carried new weight. When they spoke of their civilization's achievements, the Zephyrian leaders began to wonder what other capabilities these seemingly gentle creatures might be hiding behind their diplomatic smiles. 3 days had passed since the initial meeting, and Emperor Vexitar found himself increasingly troubled by the human delegation. They had taken quarters aboard his flagship with the same calm acceptance they showed everything else. No demands, no complaints about accommodations, no attempts to gather intelligence that his security forces could detect. Yet somehow, their very presence made him uncomfortable. The morning briefing brought more disturbing reports. Intelligence Officer Krixtal stood before the Emperor's private council, her datapad trembling slightly in her claws. Your Majesty, our deep space reconnaissance has gathered preliminary information about the human homeworld and their colonies, she began. The numbers are difficult to believe. Explain, Emperor Vexitar commanded. Earth appears to support over 8 billion individuals, as Ambassador Rodriguez claimed. But that's just their primary world. Our long-range sensors have detected human settlements in 17 different star systems. Conservative estimates suggest their total population exceeds 12 billion. Admiral Thokmar leaned forward. That's impossible. No species can maintain that many individuals across multiple worlds without massive military infrastructure. That's the strange part. Sir, we can identify very few traditional military installations. Most of their facilities appear to be civilian in nature. Manufacturing centers, research stations, agricultural colonies. Perhaps they're hiding their military assets, suggested General Vacron. Or perhaps, said a new voice from the chamber, entrance. We simply organize things differently. Everyone turned to see Jake Morrison entering the council chamber escorted by 2 guards. The human cultural attaché had requested an audience to share more information about human society. Mr. Morrison, Emperor Vexitar said carefully. You seem to have arrived at an interesting moment in our discussion. Morrison smiled pleasantly. I apologize for the timing, Your Majesty. I wanted to share some of our historical records with you. I thought they might help explain human civilization better. He produced a small device that projected holographic images into the air above the council table. The first image showed a blue-green planet covered in swirling clouds. This is Earth as it appeared about 80 years ago, Morrison explained. We were going through what we called the Third Global War. Perhaps you'd be interested in the casualty figures. The next image showed columns of numbers that made the Zephyrian leaders recoil in shock. 68 million dead in the first year, alone, Morrison said conversationally. By the end of the conflict, we had lost nearly 200 million people. That represented about 3% of our total population at the time. Intelligence Officer Krixtal dropped her datapad. 200 million casualties from a single conflict? Well, it was a fairly significant war, Morrison replied modestly. It involved most of our major population centers and required full mobilization of our industrial capacity. We had to convert virtually every manufacturing facility to military production. The images continued, showing massive factory complexes, assembly lines producing weapons and vehicles, and transportation networks moving supplies across continents. The interesting thing, Morrison continued, is how quickly we accomplished this conversion. Human society is quite adaptable when faced with existential threats. Within 6 months, we had tripled our military production capacity. Admiral Thokmar stared at the projections. Your entire civilization became a war machine? When necessary, yes. But that's not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is how quickly we returned to peaceful activities once the threat was eliminated. Within 2 years of the war's end, we had converted those same facilities back to civilian production and were focusing on rebuilding. Emperor Vextar studied the human carefully. You speak of this as if it were a normal capability. For humans, it is. We've had to develop this flexibility because our history has been quite challenging. Would you like to see records from some of our earlier conflicts? Before anyone could answer, Morrison activated another series of images. These showed conflicts spanning centuries of human history, massive armies, naval battles, aerial combat, and eventually warfare in space itself. This one was interesting, Morrison said, indicating a particularly devastating battle scene. We call it the War of the Colonies. It lasted 12 years and involved fighting across 4 different star systems. We learned a lot about logistics and supply chain management during that period. General Vakron leaned closer to examine the tactical displays. These formations, the strategic coordination, your people fight with remarkable sophistication. We've had a lot of practice, Morrison agreed. Humans have been engaged in organized warfare for most of our recorded history. We've learned that survival often depends on being better at conflict than whoever threatens us. The holographic display shifted to show peaceful scenes, cities, rebuilding, trade routes reopening, former enemies working together. Of course, we prefer peace when possible, Morrison added. War is expensive and disruptive, but we've learned that the best way to maintain peace is to be very, very good at war when it becomes necessary. Intelligence Officer Krixtal retrieved her fallen data pad with shaking claws. Mr. Morrison, these conflict records, are they representative of human military capability? Oh, these are just historical examples, Morrison replied cheerfully. Our current capabilities are much more advanced. We've learned quite a lot over the centuries about effective warfare. He paused the projection and looked around the council chamber. But I should mention that Ambassador Rodriguez specifically asked me to emphasize our preference for diplomatic solutions. Humans have discovered that trade and cooperation usually produce better long-term results than conquest. Emperor Vextar felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. Mr. Morrison, when you say your current capabilities are more advanced, well, for example, our current generation of starships can carry significantly more personnel and equipment than the historical vessels I've been showing you. And our manufacturing capacity has grown considerably since those early conflicts. We can now coordinate military operations across dozens of star systems simultaneously, if necessary. Morrison deactivated the holographic display and smiled politely at the assembled Zephyrian leaders. But as I mentioned, we much prefer to use that organizational capability for peaceful purposes. Trade, exploration, cultural exchange, these activities are much more enjoyable than warfare. The human was escorted out, leaving the council chamber in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Thokmar spoke what everyone was thinking. Your Majesty, I believe we may have made a serious error in our initial assessment. Emperor Vextar nodded slowly. Continue our intelligence gathering. I want to know everything about human military capacity. And Krixtal? Yes, Your Majesty. Find out more about those 17 star systems. If these humans are as dangerous as they appear to be, I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. As the council dispersed, each member carried the same troubling realization. The humans hadn't come as supplicants seeking mercy from a superior power. They had come as equals offering partnership. The question now was whether the Zephyrian Empire was wise enough to accept that offer before discovering what happened to those who rejected it. Emperor Vexistar had grown tired of waiting. 5 days of negotiations had produced nothing but polite conversations and disturbing revelations about human capabilities. The humans seemed content to discuss trade agreements and cultural exchanges, while his military commanders grew increasingly nervous about intelligence reports. Enough, he declared during the morning council session. We will demonstrate imperial power. These humans need to understand their position. Admiral Thokmar activated the tactical display showing nearby human settlements. Your Majesty, our scouts have located a small human outpost in the Kepler 438 system. It appears to be a research station with minimal defenses. Perfect. Destroy it. Sir, should we issue a warning first? No. Let the humans see what happens when they refuse to acknowledge imperial authority. The attack was swift and decisive. 3 Zephyrian destroyers jumped into the Kepler 438 system and obliterated the research station with overwhelming firepower. The facility and its 47 human occupants were vaporized in seconds. Emperor Vextar summoned Ambassador Rodriguez. Immediately after receiving confirmation of the attack's success, he expected panic, desperate pleas for mercy or angry threats. Instead, Rodriguez arrived at the council chamber with the same calm professionalism she had maintained throughout their meetings. Your Majesty, she said, taking her usual seat at the conference table. I understand there has been an incident at our research facility. It was not an incident, Emperor Vextar replied coldly. It was a demonstration. Your people died because you refused to accept imperial authority. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. I see. May I contact Earth to report this development? The Emperor found her reaction unsettling. No anger, no fear, no desperate bargaining. Just a simple request to make a report. You may. Rodriguez activated her communication device. The transmission was brief and conducted in the human language, so the Zephyrians could not understand the conversation. When she finished, she turned back to Emperor Vextar. Earth has received my report, Your Majesty. Our leadership will formulate an appropriate response. What kind of response? Admiral Thokmar demanded. A proportional one, Rodriguez replied, simply. Something in her tone made the Admiral uncomfortable. The same calm confidence, but now it seemed less like diplomatic politeness and more like the quiet certainty of someone who knew exactly what was coming next. Perhaps, Emperor Vextar said, your leaders will be more reasonable than their ambassador. When do you expect to hear from them? Actually, Your Majesty, I believe you'll hear from them quite soon. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication system activated. Intelligence Officer Krickstall's voice carried a note of panic that the Emperor had never heard before. Your Majesty, we have a problem. Our deep space sensors are detecting massive fleet movements throughout human space. Ships are converging on our position from multiple star systems. Emperor Vextar felt his confidence waver. How many ships? We're not certain, sir. Our sensors are having difficulty getting accurate counts because of the sheer number of contacts. Conservative estimates suggest several thousand vessels, several thousand ships. The entire Imperial Navy contained roughly 800 vessels, spread across their territory. What are their configurations? Admiral Thokmar asked. There was a pause before Krickstall responded. Sir, we're seeing ship designs we've never encountered. Some of these vessels are larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. Much larger. Ambassador Rodriguez listened to this exchange with polite interest, as if she were observing a mildly entertaining performance. Ambassador, Emperor Vextar said slowly, what exactly is approaching our position? Earth's response to your demonstration, Your Majesty. As I mentioned, it will be proportional. Jake Morrison entered the chamber at that moment, escorted by guards who looked considerably more nervous than they had days earlier. The cultural attaché carried his projection device and wore his usual friendly smile. Your Majesty, I thought you might like to understand what you're seeing on your sensors, he said cheerfully. May I? Without waiting for permission, Morrison activated his device. The holographic display showed dozens of massive starships moving through space in perfect formation. These are dreadnought-class vessels, Morrison explained conversationally. Each one carries approximately 50,000 personnel and enough firepower to sterilize a planet's surface. We have 47 of them responding to your attack on our research station. The Zephyrian leaders stared at the display in horror. Each human ship dwarfed their largest vessels. Of course, the dreadnoughts are just the heavy units, Morrison continued. Each one is accompanied by support fleets. Destroyers, cruisers, carrier vessels, supply ships. The total force responding to this incident numbers about 600,000 personnel. Admiral Thokmar's voice came out as a croak. 600,000 soldiers? Well, that's just the immediate response force, Morrison replied. Earth's military doctrine calls for overwhelming superiority in any engagement. We learned long ago that sending insufficient forces usually makes conflicts last longer and cost more lives. Emperor Vextar found his voice. You're mobilizing an invasion fleet because we destroyed one research station? Oh no, Your Majesty, Ambassador Rodriguez interjected. This isn't an invasion fleet. Earth doesn't work that way. These ships are here to ensure the safety of our diplomatic mission. Morrison nodded agreement. Humans have a saying. Peace, through superior firepower. We've found that negotiations proceed much more smoothly when all parties understand the consequences of violence. The communication system activated again. This time it was Admiral Thokmar's tactical officer, and his voice shook with fear. Admiral, the human fleet has just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of our sensor range. Sir, these ships, some of them are the size of small moons. Morrison glanced at his device and smiled. Ah, the Titan-class vessels have arrived. We only have 12 of those, but they're quite impressive. Each one can carry about 500,000 people when fully loaded. 500,000? Emperor Vextar whispered. Military personnel, support staff, manufacturing facilities, everything needed for extended operations far from home, Morrison explained. Humans learned during our colonial wars that self-sufficient fleets perform much better than those dependent on supply lines. Ambassador Rodriguez stood and smoothed her diplomatic clothing. Your Majesty, I should mention that Earth's response will arrive within the next few hours. At that point, our fleet commander will want to discuss the terms of our continued diplomatic relationship. Fleet commander? Admiral Thokmar asked weakly. Admiral Patricia Davis, Rodriguez replied. She has extensive experience in these types of situations. During the Centauri campaign, she successfully negotiated the surrender of 3 separate enemy fleets without firing a shot. Morrison packed up his projection device. Admiral Davis prefers diplomatic solutions, but she's quite capable of other approaches if necessary. During the colonial wars, she coordinated the conquest of 14 star systems in less than 6 months. The 2 humans left the council chamber, leaving the Zephyrian leadership in stunned silence. Finally, Emperor Vextar spoke. Krixtal, contact. Our fleet commanders. I want every available ship moved to defensive positions immediately. Your Majesty, Intelligence Officer Krixtal replied quietly. I don't think we have enough ships. Through the chamber's viewports, they could see the first human vessels approaching. Even at this distance, their massive hulls blotted out entire starfields. The Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered hundreds of worlds through superior military might, was about to discover what true military superiority looked like. The human fleet hung in space like a metal constellation, their massive hulls reflecting the light of distant stars. Emperor Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with growing dread. Every few minutes, more human vessels arrived, adding to the overwhelming force that now surrounded his fleet. Status report, he commanded. Admiral Thokmar's voice cracked as he spoke. Your Majesty, we count over 2,000 human ships. Their smallest vessels are larger than our heavy cruisers. The biggest ones, we don't have classifications for ships that size. Are they taking offensive positions? No, sir. They're maintaining formation at the edge of weapons range. They appear to be waiting for something. The answer came moments later when the main communication screen activated. A new human face appeared, a woman with short gray hair and calm, intelligent eyes. She wore a dark blue uniform with insignia that suggested high military rank. Emperor Vexistar, she said in perfect Zephyrian. I am Admiral Patricia Davis of the Earth Defense Force. I understand we need to discuss recent events. Emperor Vexitar, forced himself to project authority despite the circumstances. Admiral Davis, your fleet has entered Imperial space without authorization. Actually, Your Majesty, we're responding to an unprovoked attack on our personnel. 47 human civilians were killed without warning or justification. Earth takes such incidents very seriously. The Emperor studied the human admiral carefully. Like the diplomats, she showed no anger or aggression. She spoke with the same calm professionalism, but there was something else in her manner, the quiet confidence of someone who held all the advantages. It was a demonstration of imperial power, Vextar replied. Your people needed to understand their position. I see. And what position would that be? Subjects of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species will submit to imperial authority or face the consequences. Admiral Davis nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate your directness, Your Majesty. Allow me to be equally clear about Earth's position. Humanity does not submit to anyone. We never have, and we never will. You're surrounded by my fleet, Emperor, Vextar pointed out. Actually, you're surrounded by mine, Davis replied calmly. But let's not argue about tactical details. I'm here to offer you a choice. Admiral Thokmar leaned forward. What kind of choice? The same choice humanity offered when we first made contact. Peaceful coexistence as equals, or conflict with. A species that has been preparing for this conversation for over 3 centuries. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared on the screen beside Admiral Davis. Your Majesty, I should explain something that may not have been clear during our negotiations. When humans first achieved interstellar travel, we knew we would eventually encounter other species. Some would be peaceful, some would be hostile. We prepared for both possibilities, Davis continued. Every human settlement, every colony, every research station exists as part of a coordinated defense network. When you attacked our facility, you didn't destroy an isolated outpost. You attacked Earth itself. Jake Morrison joined them on the screen. Your Majesty, remember when I showed you our historical conflicts? Those weren't just random wars. They were learning experiences. Humans have spent centuries perfecting the art of organized violence. We've fought wars across star systems, Davis added. We've coordinated million-soldier invasions. We've reduced entire planets to rubble when necessary. But we've also learned that conquest creates more problems than it solves. Emperor Vexitar felt his confidence crumbling. What are you saying? We're saying that humanity learned something your empire apparently has not, Rodriguez explained. True strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the ability to turn them into allies. Admiral Davis activated a tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. Your Majesty, my ships could destroy your entire force in approximately 14 minutes. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields at their current range, while our weapons can reach your vessels easily. The tactical analysis was undeniable. The human ships outranged, outgunned, and outnumbered the Imperial fleet by an impossible margin. But Davis continued, I didn't come here to start a war. I came here to finish the conversation that began when our diplomats first contacted you. What conversation? Vextar asked weakly. The one about peaceful cooperation, Rodriguez replied. The one where we offered trade, cultural exchange, and mutual benefit instead of conquest and submission. Morrison smiled his usual friendly smile. Your Majesty, humans have discovered something wonderful. It's much easier to get what you want when you help other people get what they want too. Admiral Davis leaned forward slightly. The Zephyrian Empire has 2 choices. You can continue your current path of conquest and expansion, in which case, you'll eventually encounter species that will resist more effectively than your previous victims. Or you can join the growing community of species that have chosen cooperation over conflict. What community? Admiral Thokmar demanded. The one we've been building for the past century, Rodriguez answered. 17 different species across 43 star systems, all working together for mutual benefit. Trade, research, defense, exploration. Everything is more effective when you have willing partners instead of reluctant subjects. Emperor Vextar stared at the humans on his screen. You're offering us membership in some kind of alliance? We're offering you the same thing we offer everyone, Davis replied. Friendship if you want it. Trade partnership, if you prefer that. Or we can simply agree to leave each other alone. But we will not submit to conquest, and we will not allow attacks on our people to go unanswered. The Emperor looked around his bridge at his officers and advisors. Every face showed the same realization. The Zephyrian Empire had built its power on being the strongest force in their region of space. Now they had encountered something far stronger, and that something was offering them a choice instead of demanding surrender. If we refuse your offer? Vextar asked. Then you refuse it, Davis shrugged. We'll return to our space and you'll return to yours. But understand that any future attacks on human personnel or property will be met with overwhelming force. We prefer peace, but we're very good at war. Emperor Vextar made his decision. For the first time in 3 centuries, the Zephyrian Empire would negotiate as equals rather than conquerors. Admiral Davis, Ambassador Rodriguez, I believe we should continue our discussions. Perhaps we can find terms that benefit both our peoples. Rodriguez smiled warmly. We'd be delighted to continue our conversation, Your Majesty. After all, that's why we came here in the first place. As the communication ended, Emperor Vextar reflected on the past week. The humans had tried to tell him from the beginning what they were offering and what they were capable of. He had simply been too arrogant to listen. The Zephyrian Empire would survive this encounter, but it would never be the same. They had discovered too late that humanity's ambassadors were indeed their deadliest warriors, not because they sought war, but because they were so thoroughly prepared for it that war became unnecessary.